When Daniel accepted the job at Greystone Office Solutions, he believed it was the turning point of his career. The company looked professional, the salary was decent, and the position promised growth. On his first morning, Daniel walked into the open-plan office with cautious optimism, holding a cup of coffee and rehearsing polite introductions in his head. That optimism lasted exactly 12 minutes. His boss, Mr. Harold Klein, arrived late, slamming the glass door so hard that several employees flinched. He was a tall man with sharp eyes and an even sharper voice. Without greeting anyone, he dropped his briefcase on the desk and began criticizing the office. Too quiet, too slow, too inefficient. Daniel watched silently as Mr. Klein humiliated an assistant for a typo in an email, loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. No explanation, no guidance, just anger. By lunchtime, Daniel realized something was very wrong. Mr. Klein demanded instant results but gave unclear instructions. He contradicted himself constantly and blamed others for his own mistakes. When Daniel asked a simple clarification question, his boss replied coldly, "If you were smart enough, you wouldn't need to ask." That night, Daniel went home exhausted, confused, and uneasy. It was only the first day, and already he felt smaller than he had in years. Weeks passed, and the office atmosphere grew heavier. Employees whispered instead of talking. Laughter disappeared. Everyone lived in fear of Mr. Klein's sudden mood swings. Some days, he ignored Daniel completely. Other days, he micromanaged every detail of his work, standing behind his chair, commenting on every click of the mouse. He sent emails at 2 a.m. and expected replies before sunrise. If someone took a sick day, Mr. Klein called it a lack of commitment. Daniel noticed a pattern. Whenever something went wrong, Mr. Klein publicly blamed someone else. When something went right, he took full credit in meetings with upper management. The worst moment came during a team presentation. Daniel had worked late for days to prepare it. In front of executives, Mr. Klein interrupted him repeatedly, corrected him with false information, and finally said, "This is why I don't trust my team." Daniel stood there, humiliated, while no one defended him. That evening, Daniel seriously considered quitting, but fear held him back. Fear of unemployment, of failure, of starting over. The breaking point arrived quietly. One Monday morning, Daniel discovered that Mr. Klein had reassigned his completed project to another employee without explanation. When Daniel calmly asked why, his boss exploded. "You should be grateful you even work here," Mr. Klein shouted. "You're replaceable." Something changed inside Daniel at that moment. The fear faded, replaced by clarity. He realized the problem was not his performance, his skills, or his effort. The problem was the man standing in front of him. Over the next few weeks, Daniel documented everything: emails, insults, unrealistic demands, public humiliation. He updated his resume and began applying elsewhere. When Daniel finally handed in his resignation, Mr. Klein laughed and said, "You won't last anywhere else." 6 months later, Daniel was working at a healthier company with a supportive manager and a respectful team. For the first time in years, he enjoyed going to work. Looking back, Daniel understood one important lesson. The worst boss in his life also taught him the most: how not to lead, how to protect his self-worth, and when to walk away. After Daniel decided to leave, something unexpected happened. He stopped trying to please Mr. Klein. He did his job professionally, on time, and by the rules, but nothing more. No unpaid overtime, no answering emails at night, no emotional reactions. This quiet change confused Mr. Klein more than open rebellion ever could. Mr. Klein tried new tactics. He criticized his tone, his posture, even the way he said good morning. When that failed, he pretended Daniel didn't exist. Meetings were scheduled without him, information was withheld, deadlines appeared without context. But Daniel was no longer afraid. He observed everything calmly, adding more notes to his growing folder of evidence. He also noticed something important. Other employees began to follow his example. They spoke less, documented more, and stopped apologizing for existing. The office was still toxic, but cracks had appeared. Mr. Klein's behavior started to catch up with him. Turnover increased. Talented employees left quietly, one by one. Projects were delayed. Clients complained about poor communication. Upper management began asking questions. Instead of taking responsibility, Mr. Klein tightened control. He demanded daily reports, scheduled unnecessary meetings, and blamed a lazy generation for every problem. During a performance review, he told Daniel, "You lack ambition." Daniel smiled politely. Inside, he knew the truth. Ambition without dignity was useless. What Mr. Klein didn't realize was that the company culture he destroyed had once protected him. Now, no one defended him anymore. The turning point came during an internal audit. Human Resources requested documentation from multiple departments. Emails were reviewed. Complaints, long ignored, were suddenly taken seriously. Daniel was invited to a private meeting. Calmly, professionally, he shared his records. He didn't exaggerate, he didn't complain, he simply showed facts. Weeks later, rumors spread. Mr. Klein was absent more often. His office door stayed closed. His voice lost its confidence. One Friday afternoon, the staff received a short email. "Mr. Harold Klein is no longer with the company. We wish him well in future endeavors." No one clapped, no one celebrated, but the air felt lighter. The new manager was different. She listened. She asked questions. She said, "Thank you." Still, the damage remained. Employees were cautious. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly. Daniel noticed how deeply Mr. Klein's leadership had affected everyone. People apologized too much. They feared mistakes. Silence had become a habit. Change came in small moments: lunch conversations, shared jokes, honest feedback. Gradually, the office felt human again. Daniel realized that toxic leadership doesn't end when the boss leaves. Healing takes time. Years later, Daniel became a manager himself. On his first day leading a team, he remembered Mr. Klein, not with anger, but with clarity. He remembered how words could destroy confidence, how fear killed creativity, how power without empathy created nothing. Daniel promised himself one thing: no one on his team would ever feel small for doing their best. The worst boss in his life became the strongest lesson of his career. Even after years had passed, Daniel occasionally felt the shadow of Mr. Klein's leadership follow him. A raised voice in a meeting made his shoulders tense. An unclear email triggered unnecessary anxiety. The worst boss of his life had trained him to expect punishment instead of feedback. Daniel became aware of this invisible damage when a colleague gently asked, "Why do you apologize so much?" That question stayed with him. He began to reflect on how deeply toxic authority could shape a person's behavior. Healing, he realized, was not a single moment, it was a process. As a manager, Daniel worked hard to unlearn everything Mr. Klein had normalized. He encouraged questions. He admitted his own mistakes. When someone failed, he focused on solutions instead of blame. Slowly, his team grew more confident, more creative. Still, fear returned sometimes, especially during conflict. In those moments, Daniel chose patience over control. He remembered how silence had felt under Mr. Klein and made space for voices instead. Leadership, Daniel learned, was not about authority, it was about safety. One evening, Daniel received a connection request on a professional networking site. The name made his stomach tighten: Harold Klein. The message was short and polite. Mr. Klein congratulated Daniel on his career progress and asked if they could catch up. Daniel didn't reply immediately. He reread the message several times, wondering if time had changed the man or only his circumstances. For the first time, Daniel had power in the situation, and he understood that closure didn't require confrontation. Curiosity won. They met in a quiet cafe. Mr. Klein looked older, less sharp. He spoke about misunderstandings and difficult environments. He never apologized, not directly. At one point he said, "I pushed people because I expected excellence." Daniel listened calmly. Then he replied, "You didn't push, you crushed." The words were simple, honest, and final. Mr. Klein said nothing. Daniel left the cafe feeling lighter than he had expected. That conversation stayed with Daniel, not as anger, but as responsibility. He understood how easily stress, pressure, and ego could turn a leader into a tyrant. The cycle continued unless someone consciously broke it. Daniel began mentoring younger managers. He spoke openly about toxic leadership, burnout, and psychological safety. His story resonated. The worst boss in his life became a warning he shared, so others wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. One afternoon, Daniel walked through his office and noticed something simple. People were laughing. No whispers, no fear, no tension. In that moment, he realized that the story of Mr. Klein no longer hurt. It had become part of his past, not a wound, but a scar. And scars, Daniel knew, were proof of survival.